2-1 winners against a very stubborn Watford side, it has to be said. They made it a lot nervier than really it should have been, because United outplayed the Hornets, particularly in the first 45. But for the case of Marouane Fellaini, 2 games against Burnley, of course, he featured the game before, and now Watford, he picked up 2 man-of-the-match performances. In a trusted soldier, Mourinho has put lots of faith and been rewarded.
At every club, Jose Mourinho has these guys, doesn't he? He always has a guy who might not look like the most obvious talented guy, he might not look like the most obvious need for a team, but Marouane Fellaini has shown, the whole time he's been in the Premier League at Everton as well, he's shown that he can be very effective when used in the right way. In many ways, there are certain things that you can't counteract. You know, if you've got someone who's really, really fast, they're really, really fast, and it's hard to catch up with them. If you've got someone who's really, really big, that also presents its own issue. You know, he's a big guy, but he's also a strong guy. You know, his heading, but also his brilliant chest control and stuff. He completely changes the point of attack for a team. And we know Man United have got so many good players that they can attack on the ground and they can slice you that way. But he brings another threat. And I think Jose Mourinho, because he trusts him, that's the most important thing for a Mourinho player.
Yeah, Leon Osman was saying in the press this week how his discipline often let him down at Everton.
Yes.
But he's clearly been working on that.
Yeah, he has. And I think the fact is he's been made to feel important. And every player likes that. You know, Manchester United went the extra mile to keep him at the end of last season. He's clearly a key player for Belgium. And, you know, you think of the midfield players that didn't go. And like Radja Nainggolan, for example. Yeah. If you'd have asked Belgian fans who would they have rather gone to the World Cup out of Nainggolan and Fellaini, 99 out of 100...
Not even close.
Yeah. Would have said Radja, and the other one would have probably been from Fellaini's family. So I think if you look at that, he's someone who could come on and fix any situation as well. Yeah. Roberto Martinez used him in that way. And to have a situation in club and country where your coach says, I trust you, you can be my solution to a lot of different problems. I mean, that's obviously going to help.
Yeah, and you get the impression Jose Mourinho just enjoys proving the doubters wrong. And whenever Fellaini is being kind of, I suppose, written off, you know, he'd love nothing more than him to pick up the Man of the Match award. But that tactic can only work so much. If the onus is on Manchester United to break the opposition down, maybe he isn't the answer.
That's true, but I think one of the reasons that we see so much with Fellaini is that even if he's not starting, you can bring him on as a substitute to try and, for example, hold on to a win. But if you concede a goal, then he can just be pushed further up the field because he's been used. And at Everton, he was used as a second striker sometimes. And in fact, when they had injuries, he was used as an actual centre-forward. But you could play him as far back as defensive midfield. And I guess if you're in a real bind, you could maybe chuck him at centre-back. So that's a guy who's versatile, he's trustworthy. So even if you're just 20 minutes from the end of the game and you're trying to hold on or you're trying to get the winner, he's always a guy you can turn to, which I guess is why Jose Mourinho likes him so much.
And it was an interesting quote, actually, from Football 365 this week. Ian Watson writes that through United's struggles, it's the men Mourinho trusts the most who stepped up, including the likes of Fellaini, Smalling, David De Gea and Romelu Lukaku, a spine with the necessary backbone for the job.
Yes, I always find the De Gea discussion really interesting because, of course, most people think that without question he's the Premier League's greatest goalkeeper. I think he fulfills a really unusual role for a club of that size because you don't expect someone who keeps goal for Manchester United to have to make that many saves.
He's so busy, yeah.
And, you know, if he'd have gone to Real Madrid those years ago, before Thibaut Courtois and all the rest of it, he would have been fulfilling a very, very different role to the one he is at Manchester United. But he gets them out of so many holes. It's incredible.
Ben Foster called him the Messi of goalkeeping this week. And you watch... And there's an interesting discussion, I guess, around De Gea is, do you change the way you play because you've got a player of that talent? You know, do you perhaps go more on the attack knowing that you've got a guy who's probably 10, 15% more likely to save all these chances than the average goalkeeper? It is it's a changing dynamic. We've talked about kind of Alisson and these expensive goalkeepers that are coming in. Kepa is coming to Chelsea for a world record fee. Now, De Gea's not going to cost them any more money. They've got him tied down for a long time now. But you wonder if maybe they could adapt the way they play to get the most out of De Gea, but also give them a better chance of winning games.
That is the thing, because he is a goalkeeper who likes to be involved. For a goalkeeper, that's normally a terrible thing. You don't want to hear that. A goalkeeper who wants to make stuff happen is an accident waiting to happen. But he's not that. But he could definitely do with being more involved.
And it's interesting, it's been picked up there in the byline, because before the game against Watford, he had a 50% save conversion rate this season, which was the lowest in the Premier League, which just goes to add to that, which is a back with a worldie after months of woe. These have been testing times for him.
More than testing times. And I think the way that people reacted to him in Spain and the way that Luis Enrique kind of looked after him after Spain's England game at Wembley. I mean, we're talking about Fellaini getting confidence from what he did at international level.
Yeah.
I think it's the same with De Gea. And they've looked after him because there was a lot of debate in Spain, in the media and amongst fans during the World Cup, especially after that game against Portugal where he made the fluff against Cristiano Ronaldo. A lot of people saying he should be dropped for Kepa.
Yeah.
And he held on to his place. And they made a big song and dance after the England game about he's the guy who won us this game. Now, of course, if that Danny Welbeck goal had been allowed, which it should have been, how you spin that as a glorious comeback from De Gea, well, you can't.
No.
So luck has sort of worked for him as well. And the feeling is the worms turned a little bit. But it's given him enormous confidence. And Luis Enrique has been a big champion of his.
You get those World Cup campaigns, you know, it's so great going to the World Cup as a player, but there are traumatic campaigns. And Spain's was pretty traumatic. Remember, the day before the tournament starts, the coach
is gone.
The coach is fired. The first game is an incredible game against Portugal. He makes a mistake. And pretty much most of the Spanish papers, I read all four of the main ones the next day, and they were all calling basically for him to be replaced by Kepa, who at the time, I guess, was unknown around the rest of the world. Now he's the world's most expensive goalkeeper. But De Gea has had that weird relationship with Spain where he has made mistakes for the international team that he's never really made for Manchester United, not since his first year, I guess, under Ferguson. Now what we're seeing is, you know, after a small sample size, first couple of games of the Premier League season, this is the David De Gea we know. We've seen enough of him over the last few years to know that he's a top-draw goalkeeper, and I think he's going to continue in this vein.
OK, so he's been in the spotlight. Another United player who's been in the spotlight who didn't even feature against Watford at the weekend, Marcus Rashford. We spoke about it this time last week. Jamie Carragher, former Liverpool defender, of course, now a TV pundit on these shores, talking about how Marcus Rashford might be best served to ply his trade away from Old Trafford. Now, of course, Jose Mourinho came back and said, look, listen, this man has played more minutes than any of his contemporaries, particularly those fellow England internationals. But then Jamie's come back to reiterate the view, saying he's only started 12 games in the Premier League as a striker. And if he wants to hone his skills as such, he also needs to carry on and move for that one reason alone, because he's not going to get ahead of Romelu Lukaku. Do you agree with Jamie here, or do you side with Mourinho and the minutes played?
So I see Jamie's point. I see Jamie's point that he's not playing as an out-and-out striker, but I think most modern forwards these days have to be able to play in a number of positions. If he wants to be playing more going forward, then, you know, he needs to be able to play on the left, on the right, and through the middle. And I think someone with his skill set, where he's a pacey guy who can run with the ball, who can do different things, there's no bad kind of thing about playing on the left or playing on the right. Obviously, eventually he will be playing through the centre. That always happens. The young guys kind of grow up and they turn into centre forwards. But Mourinho saying that about the minutes is also kind of an irrelevance. I think you have to say that Mourinho might not necessarily be the best coach for him. You'd rather to see Rashford, say, playing under a Sarri, as we discussed about Hazard, or under a Guardiola. Imagine how many goals a season he would score under Guardiola. So would I like to see him ply his trade away from Manchester United? Perhaps, because it would be interesting to see what he could do under a really aggressive attacking coach. But I actually think that it's not the worst thing for him to be playing in a number of positions.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. And, you know, Mourinho gets a lot of stick for the way he's not just doesn't invest in time and effort in younger players, but in fact, it's sort of come to a point where a lot of people feel he doesn't improve players, period, now. Having said that, I think you can see that I don't think his treatment of Rashford's been particularly bad. I think if there was a worry I would have about Rashford at this age, is that he's being overplayed. I think for him to get used to coming on in different situations, to starting the game sometimes is not a bad thing. I think, as Ed's saying, him to play in different positions is not a bad thing. We have to say his attitude has been absolutely spot on.
Well, it's
as well.
funny you should say that, because Rio Ferdinand in the press this week has come out and said, you know, he needs to maybe stop sulking, or just, you know, not even think about not being played in his preferred position and just get on with the job in hand.
There's an element of that, but I think you also look at this situation. I don't think that Rashford is in a bad situation right now. I think a lot of the talk around him, like he's not contributing to it. The Anthony Martial situation, you know, and how Mourinho has dealt with him seems to me to be far more damaging than what's going on with Marcus Rashford. I don't know if you'd agree.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think the thing is, you've always got... we've talked about the commercial needs at Arsenal. I think, and where Manchester United are commercially, which is ahead of, well, pretty much every club in the world, I think one of the worst things about where they are with Mourinho at the moment is that assets that are worth a lot of money and should be garnering publicity, name for Manchester United, like Paul Pogba is another example, like Martial, who should be up there in the conversation amongst the world's best strikers. They're having their personality taken away. And that is damaging, I don't think just on the pitch, but off it. And that is something that, if I was Ed Woodward, I would be really concerned about.
OK, gents, for now, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's not forget, of course, that the Premier League action on Monday night saw the evergreen Glenn Murray salvage a point for Brighton at Southampton. And that'll be coming up next on Premier League Today.